It was on the abandoned and desolate moon of Callista-9 that the trio of strangers met. Their journey had been long and filled with improbable coincidences, almost as if destiny itself had conspired to bring them together in this forgotten corner of the universe. The cold wind howled mercilessly as they crouched around the rusted hatch, huddling against the biting chill. The dying glow of the setting red dwarf star shone on the jagged ice-broken horizon, casting sinister shadows over the sharp ruins of an ancient, long-forgotten civilization. "Are you sure about this, Rikkon?" hissed the one-eyed man, his breath freezing in the frigid air. "As sure as death itself," Rikkon replied, his cracked fingers working the rusted keypad of the hatch. "This is where it all began, Tane. And where it will all end." The thin, trembling girl beside them glanced at the one-eyed man. Her pupils dilated from the stimulant they had shared moments earlier. "The whispers led us here, Tane. Don't you trust them?" Tane grumbled in frustration but said nothing. Instead, he adjusted the patch covering his scarred, dead eye. In the cold air, he could almost feel the weight of the malevolent presence that had haunted this place for millennia. The hatch let out a low groan, and the ancient door opened reluctantly, defying the rust and ice that held it shut. An oppressive darkness yawned before them, seeming to suck the warmth from their ragged breaths. "Well, what are you waiting for?" Rikkon demanded, already gripping the handle of his crude electric blade. "There are no heroes among us. No saints will answer our prayers. It's just us and the secrets buried in this forsaken tomb." The girl hesitated for a second, her eyes glazed as the whispers scratched at her mind. Then, with a sharp and decisive nod, she took the first step into the darkness. Tane and Rikkon followed closely behind her, their weapons at the ready. The darkness was so thick they could barely see their hands in front of their faces, and the only sound was the crunch of ice beneath their boots. Suddenly, a faint light flickered ahead, drawing them in like moths to a flame. As they approached, they saw it emanating from a circular chamber at the end of a long corridor. The walls were lined with strange symbols and glyphs that seemed to writhe and twist as if they were alive. In the center of the room stood an ancient pedestal, upon which rested a small metallic sphere that glowed with a soft blue light. Tane cautiously stepped forward, his one good eye scanning for any signs of danger. Rikkon stepped forward to examine the pedestal. "It's a memory core," he said, his voice filled with awe, "from an ancient race that once inhabited this moon." He reached out to touch it, but Tane grabbed his hand and pulled him back. "Be careful," Tane warned. "We don't know what kind of memories are in there." The girl had already moved closer to the pedestal, reaching out to touch the sphere when suddenly she recoiled, her eyes wide with terror. "They're not memories," she whispered hoarsely. "It's alive." Tane and Rikkon exchanged confused glances as the sphere began to pulse with a strange blue light. Suddenly, tendrils of energy shot out from its surface, wrapping around the girl and pulling her toward it. Tane lunged forward to grab her, but it was too late. The sphere absorbed her into its pulsating mass of energy, leaving behind only a faint cloud of smoke. "What have we done?" Rikkon murmured, his face pale with shock. Tane stood frozen, his mind racing. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. They were supposed to find answers, not lose another one of their own. Rikkon stepped back, eyes wide with horror, but Tane felt something else. A tug at his consciousness, a whisper, faint but insistent. He could feel the sphere probing, reaching out, as if it was not done yet. But what was it? And why was it drawing them in? The cold chamber seemed to grow even darker, the blue light pulsing faintly in rhythm with their uneasy breaths. Rikkon, pale and trembling, moved toward the doorway. "We need to get out of here," he muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. It was as if the sphere had already tightened its grip on him too. Tane stood his ground though. He wasn't ready to run, not yet. He'd seen too much and they were too close to something. The sphere wasn't just some relic from an ancient race. It was a living entity, and they had disturbed it. "We can't leave now, Rikkon. Not when we're this close." The whispers returned, growing louder this time. Tane clenched his fists as if the act could silence them. But they weren't external. The voices weren't coming from outside. They were inside his head. "She's still here," a voice said. It was faint, almost drowned out by the others, but it was unmistakable. It was her. The girl, the one who had been taken by the sphere, was speaking to them. Or rather, through the sphere. "Don't run," she urged. "You need to see." Rikkon's eyes widened in terror, but Tane was resolute. He took a step forward, closer to the pulsating sphere. The energy tendrils that had once lashed out were now receding, as if inviting him in. "What do you want?" he muttered, half to himself, half to the sphere. There was no answer, only the steady rhythm of light pulsating from within the core. But then the ground beneath him began to tremble. The entire chamber seemed to shift, like a long-buried machine awakening after millennia of sleep. The glyphs on the walls, once inert and faint, began to glow softly. Rikkon stumbled back, eyes wild. "This is wrong, Tane. We shouldn't be here." But Tane ignored him. His focus was entirely on the sphere. He reached out cautiously, half expecting it to react violently again, but nothing happened. The energy remained contained within the sphere. He could feel its pull, stronger now, as if the sphere was trying to communicate something, but what? Suddenly, the whispers coalesced into a single voice. "Release us." Tane jerked back, startled. The voice was clear now, no longer just a vague hum in the back of his mind. "Release us from the prison of time." His heart raced. Prison of time. What did that mean? He looked around the chamber, taking in the glyphs, the sphere, the faint blue glow that seemed to animate everything. Could this entire structure be more than just ruins? Could it be a temporal cage, trapping something or someone inside? Rikkon's panic was palpable now. He was pacing near the exit, glancing back at Tane with wild eyes. "We need to leave," he muttered again, though it sounded more like a desperate plea than a command. Tane turned toward him. "Rikkon, if we leave now, we'll never know what's really going on here. We're standing on the edge of something. Something big." Rikkon shook his head violently, his voice trembling. "Something big. Or something deadly." Before Tane could respond, the ground shook again, more violently this time. The chamber's ceiling began to crack, thin lines spidering across the surface. Dust rained down, but the sphere remained undisturbed, still glowing softly. The voice came again, more urgent now. "Release us before it's too late." Tane still stared at the spot where the girl had vanished, trying to process what had just happened. The sphere continued to pulse with its strange blue light, but now it seemed calmer, as if it had taken what it wanted. The cold in the chamber seemed to intensify, causing Tane's breath to come out in thick clouds. "She's still here," he muttered, his eyes locked on the sphere. "I can feel it." "This is madness," Rikkon said, his voice trembling. "We need to get out of here now, before we're next." He took a step back toward the exit, but stopped when he realized that Tane wasn't following. "Tane, we can't stay here. This place is cursed, and you know it." But Tane wasn't listening. His focus was entirely on the sphere, which seemed to be drawing him in further, whispering promises of understanding, of truth. "It's not what we think it is," Tane said quietly, as if speaking more to himself than to Rikkon. "This sphere. It's alive, but it's not malevolent. It's been waiting for something. His hand hovered over the glowing surface, hesitant but curious. He felt the whispers growing louder in his mind, clearer now. "They are trapped," the voices said. "We are all trapped." Rikkon's fear had turned to anger. He stormed toward Tane, grabbing him by the shoulder and pulling him back. "Enough. This is how she got taken. Don't you get it? This thing will consume us all." Tane looked at Rikkon, his single eye blazing with determination. "What if she's not dead, Rikkon? What if she's still inside that thing, waiting for us to help her?" Rikkon hesitated, the weight of Tane's words sinking in. But before he could respond, the ground beneath them began to shake again, even more violently than before. Dust and debris fell from the ceiling as the ancient structure groaned in protest. "This place is coming down," Rikkon said urgently. "If we don't leave now, we'll be buried alive." But Tane wouldn't move. His mind was set. "I'm not leaving her behind," he said, and without another word, he pressed his hand firmly against the sphere. For a moment nothing happened. Then, the light from the sphere intensified, and Tane felt a surge of energy course through him, like he was being pulled into something far greater than himself. Rikkon watched in horror as Tane's body began to glow with the same blue light. The sphere seemed to be absorbing him, just like it had the girl. "Tane, no!" Rikkon yelled, but it was too late. In a flash of brilliant light, Tane was gone, leaving Rikkon alone in the crumbling chamber. The sphere continued to pulse, now brighter than ever, as if it had absorbed the very essence of those it had taken. Desperation clawed at Rikkon's heart. He looked around the room, knowing he had only moments before the entire structure collapsed. But as he turned to run, the whispers echoed in his mind once more. "We are not gone," they said, and Rikkon froze. He turned back toward the sphere, trembling. "Tane, is that you?" The sphere pulsed again, and this time, a faint image appeared within its glowing light. It was Tane and the girl. They were both inside, their faces calm, almost serene. "We're not trapped," Tane's voice echoed in Rikkon's mind. "We've crossed over. This place. It's not a tomb. It's a gateway to something beyond." Rikkon's heart pounded as the chamber around him began to cave in. He had a choice to make: stay and risk being taken by the sphere, or leave and never know what lay beyond. In the end, he took one last look at the glowing sphere and made his decision. With a deep breath, he ran toward the exit, leaving the sphere, and whatever truth it held, behind, as the moon of Callista-9 crumbled into dust. But tell me, did you like this story? Would you change anything? Would you like a sequel? Leave it in the comments, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications and leave your like. And for more stories like this, click on the video that appears on the screen.